And we are about to start on a lecture on Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most influential people in the contemporary period. And because of that, and perhaps one of the reasons why he is so influential, is that he's one of the most controversial people that you'll be considering. So what I'm going to do today, what I hope to do today, is to put you into the human atmosphere that this gentleman was working in. Not because that's my, I like to do that, I mean I do, but in fact this was an approach to understanding people's philosophies which had become popular and popularized by Goethe and Hegel, who insisted that if you really want to understand someone's writings, the more you can put it into the biography, the more you can fit it into the person's life, so you can connect to life, you can connect life with theory or with texts or with points of view, the more you'll understand what this person was trying to present. And certainly when you get to somebody like Nietzsche, this is especially important to keep in mind. I'm starting with this slide just to give you an idea. Quite often Nietzsche is connected with Nazism. His will to power is considered as, as raw power, and and to see one of the reasons why this happened was because his sister joined the Nazis, and because he had become ill by this time, she had made his works available to the Nazis, and they of course took it and interpreted his whole work from this angle. This is somebody like us. So I just wanted to start off with this because, just as an example, a letter he wrote to his sister towards the end of his life. "You have committed one of the greatest stupidities for yourself and for me." This is Nietzsche speaking. "Your association with an anti-Semitic chief," this is the Nazis, "expresses a foreignness to my whole way of life." Way of life, very important for understanding his philosophy. His philosophy is very much connected to his life and the way he lived his life. This is existential philosophizing at its best. "Your association with the Nazis fills me again and again with ire or melancholy. It's a matter of honor with me to be absolutely clear and unequivocal in relation to anti-Semitism, namely opposed to it, as I am in my writings. My disgust with this party, the Nazis, which would like the benefit of my name only too well, is as pronounced as possible, and that I am unable to do anything against it, that the name of Zarathustra is used in every anti-Semitic correspondence sheet of the Nazis, has almost made me sick several times." So this is just to give you one example of, perhaps you've never heard of Nietzsche, but often Nietzsche is associated with, and his will to power is associated with raw power, imposing your strength, meaning your physical strength on everybody else, imposing yourself on others. And if you really follow his whole philosophy, and especially the comments he makes about his life, you'll find a very different human being behind what he's writing. And I will try to help you to see another angle of perhaps what is not often presented about Nietzsche, about how he was thinking about what he was doing during this particular lecture. The main slides are here, they're always on the web, but I also have presented them here as a way you can perhaps use them as a working paper if you wish to, with the rest of the slides. But the first page is primarily what's going to be done for you in the lecture and cover some of these main points that are there. So, first of all, therefore, and if you notice under the main title there, the Nietzschean hammer, perspectivism, philosophy as autobiography, that's what I've been trying to tell you up to now and what I've been saying, that basically philosophy is autobiography. And by the way, the numbers refer to the aphorisms that he gives in the book Beyond Good and Evil. That's what the references are to, the book that is on your syllabus, that the book that, if you're using the book. So those in aphorism number 6, he says, all philosophy is the autobiography of the philosopher. Pointing our attention, in other words, in a world that had become very theoretical and very speculative and very, computerized, that, serious thinking only comes out of a person's life. And therefore, if you're really serious about what you're presenting to us to think about as a philosopher or a thinker or whatever, put your life behind it. All right? This, what you're saying, should be connected to your life. And if there's a severance there, then this is a kind of a sham, a kind of a hypocrisy, a kind of something to make a person think about what it is you're presenting us with, to think about if it's coming from someone who isn't even attempting to live what they are preaching. And one of the things that Nietzsche is often respected for, no matter even by the people who don't like him much, is that they cannot deny that this gentleman tried, as much as a human being can, to actually live out his rather interesting, disturbing philosophy of life. So this, and it didn't come out fully, that's all right, but the idea of this picture here is that primarily Nietzsche, and the title of the whole lecture really is the trajectory of the prophet of a dying civilization. Let me comment on that. Tragic, because I think this is, Nietzsche is kind of, as far as any human has achieved it, is in his own way, a Prometheus, an Oedipus, an Antigone, any of the great models from the ancient world. Well, here is a human being who is living his life at its best, not seeking happiness, not seeking reward and success and acclaim, but really trying, from his own point of view, whether you agree with him or not, trying to present what he sincerely believes is the issue at the time. Perhaps not the issue today. And that's something to warn you about. He would not want you to be a Nietzschean. He would want you to take the principles from what he was doing at his time, in his context, with his autobiography, understand what he was trying to do, and then apply that to the world today. So he's a tragic figure. And so when you read his whole works, and when I'm trying to present him to you in this way, it's a tragic trajectory of the prophet of a dying civilization. He really believed that he was trying to save his civilization, European civilization, with all that it had produced and all of its hopes with the scientific revolution and the technology and the hope for progress and the perfectibility of the human and all the slogans of the early modern period. He was now taking a look at the results of all of this in his German and European situation, context, of priding themselves as the heights of the producers of civilization and progress. And he was looking at his society, and he was kind of judging it, if you like, and seeing it as something that makes him sick. That it had become soft, consumer-oriented, okay? Everybody wanted happiness, and happiness meant comfort and ease and progress and prosperity, and that it had lost its heart. It had lost the soul, which he found in the ancient world, in the Greek civilization. That this civilization coming out of what it came out of has lost its heart, has lost its thing. And so a main thing he was trying to do is it was a wake-up call. It was kind of like a Socratic shock, like Socrates thought he was shocking the Greek Athenian people out of their sophistical and might is right and power mentality and success and all of this, trying to get them to use reason for something more serious, for the good of the polis, for the good of humanity. He was trying to wake up the Athenian polis, the Athenian society. Nietzsche was, by his own words, and I'll show you, trying to wake up this European civilization, not to destroy it, not to criticize it in the negative sense, but to look at it critically and have people look at it critically so they can save the baby from going down the drain with the bath water when it is being looked at. So he was in the 20th century, he came to be considered as a kind of a prophet, because he wasn't really discovered and developed in many, many different ways, by the way, and by different philosophies of life in the 20th century, because they saw him as sort of seeing something happening to their civilization, which only became clear with World War I, with the Great Depression, with World War II, all right? With seeing the most advanced civilization, the most advanced peoples, the most educated, the most technologically developed, eating away at each other. And in the capitalist system, seeing how much, by not being careful about what it's doing, the capitalist system is the best possible one for everybody, the Great Depression exposed that raw capitalism, or capitalism the way it was being presented, was a horrible thing for humanity. It was only good for those who benefited from it. So he was seen as somebody in the 19th century who was already seeing what was to come to flower in the 20th century. So this is the tragic trajectory of the prophet of a dying civilization. So Nietzsche, going back to that first thing to sort of explain it a little bit more, he's been seen as a god, people have worshipped him, as a demon, as an angel of light, who therefore you have to be careful because an angel of light could be the devil, but an angel of light, either way you see it, a genius, a madman, a prophet, or as one of the titles of his book, human, all too human. He would never have wanted to be any of these other things that people were calling him. He was a tortured soul. So you're now not being exposed to somebody, a nice academic teacher who's doing research and producing books and all of this. He was living his philosophy, and as such, it was the philosophy of a tortured soul, and trying to live his philosophy actually made him more and more of a tortured soul. And with the cliche of, God is dead, you will see, if you look at his works carefully, this was somebody who could never detach himself from his God. So he was all through his life, in a way, seeking this God, but at the same time, by what he was doing, he was killing this God. Now, killing the God of the European Christian civilization that he was part of. And this takes you back to something very important. There's nothing that's sort of as simple as it sounds, God is dead. Because when we see some of what he said about it, his whole point about God is dead is that, in monotheism, the community is supposed to reflect the divine. And when you take a look, and he said this at another point, he said, when I look at you Christians, I don't see your Redeemer, I don't see a Christ there. I see the exact opposite of it all. So he in his literature, in his seeking, in his constant identification with Christ and writing the Antichrist and all of this, this is the interesting part of the human adventure and the study of Nietzsche, apart from the writings that he has. Now, there are 3 books that I refer to here because they're ones that have helped me most in my trajectory with Nietzsche. The works of Kaufmann, of course, he's translated many of his works, but a book by somebody named Reinhardt, Kurt Reinhardt, which he includes in it a lot of the biographical and autobiographical stuff that he gives, which sheds a lot of light on the process by which this gentleman was presenting his philosophy. Another one is William Barrett, and for a specific purpose, I want to mention our own Peter Bornedal, who is a recognized Nietzsche authority in the world today. He has done a lot to redeem him as a philosopher, because a lot of people, snootily looked upon him as, he's not a philosopher, because a philosopher has to do philosophy the way they want to do philosophy. And they missed the whole point of this gentleman, that he was one of the things he was reacting against, is when you start to sort of codify something as important as philosophy and start to make, philosophy, the search for wisdom, starts to become just what some of these people were doing in the modern period. He was trying to break through this wall that was keeping people from really seeking beyond the surface and looking at the abyss beyond what he was writing, what he was trying to find. And so Peter Bornedal's books, and one of them is called The Surface and the Abyss, is precisely a very good one for those of you who would like to pursue his more philosophical, the influence he's had on philosophy directly, as philosophy is more understood today. So philosophy as autobiography meant, as I've been trying to say from the beginning of this lecture, bringing together the biography as much as possible of the person and the output of the person, so you can see it as an integral whole, and especially with something like philosophy that's serious for me and you as a human being, not technical stuff, then we do want to always be careful that what is attracting us, if we didn't do Bacon in 203, if you had done Bacon, you'd see his idols, the marketplace, the theater, that which attracts us, or impresses us because of its, it's so nicely encapsulated and organized. But we miss the human part of philosophy, the search for wisdom. And so previously to Nietzsche, and he claims that Goethe influenced him a lot. Goethe had set the tone for this, so when you read, if ever you read Goethe's Faust, because it's done in 203 and you don't have to do that anymore, Goethe's whole work of Faust is precisely presenting this figure of Faust in Faust Part 1, and then in Faust Part 2, bringing in his own autobiography, his own development as a human being and a human thinker, Goethe, and giving you Part 2, where he adjusts very much what he has done. And so to understand the whole work of Goethe, you'd have to follow his autobiography, his letters to Eckermann, his secretary. So following in this tradition, and that's what this lecture is claiming very simply and very limitedly to be trying to do to this great opus, this great set of works that you get from Nietzsche. Nietzsche calls Goethe's letters to Eckermann, he's got his autobiography where he tells you, tells his secretary what's happening and how he's developing, and etc. He calls this the best German book, not the text itself of Faust, but the autobiographical material that lets you see what was going on in Goethe's life as a human being and as a social being and as a thinker in a community, how he was progressing in presenting the great work of Faust. So, thus spake Zarathustra, ecce homo. In many of these things you'll find his autobiographical things in what he's writing, and this puts him into this whole line of autobiography influencing thought of Augustine, Goethe, and now Nietzsche. Useful references from there in your sheet, if you like, afterwards. These are the ones I mentioned before. The Existential Revolt by Kurt Reinhardt, where you get the existential material a lot in there, the autobiographical linking. That's what existential means, by the way. It doesn't mean passion. It doesn't mean something different from reason or rational. It means that rational on its own, missing the human aspect of experience, is missing if you're talking about philosophy, the search for wisdom, which is useful for me and you as a human being, not just as something technical. You have Irrational Man by William Barrett. You have The Surface and the Abyss by Peter Bornedal, and Walter Kaufmann's many works where he has done all the translating. The book I am referring to and the aphorisms, the numbers there, are all from Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche, translated by Hollingdale in the Penguin Classics, which many of us still insist on using rather than just the selections you have. But that's up to your teacher and your own interest. This is a brief biography. I'm not going to go through it now. It's on your sheets here as well. But just the interesting stuff is he starts off as a Lutheran, Protestant, Christian, probably memorizing much of the Bible. But then something happens in his own life as he progresses, and he has a radical rejection of this whole atmosphere that he was into. But academically, he was at the top. He was made. He was appointed chair in 1869 of classical philology at Basel, awarded his doctorate from Leipzig without examination, publishes his first book, The Birth of Tragedy, where he goes back to the Greek world and the Greek world of tragedy to try to recover what he thinks were some great human qualities and attributes which had been lost in this consumerist, liberal Christian society of that was that was coming up in his times in Europe, where Christianity had become this kind of warm feeling of love and sort of just a visa to heaven, and with lots of hypocrisy and lots of self-seeking and lots of nice slogans and all of this. This is what he was attacking. That sort of made him sick. And if you take a look on your fly sheets back now here, I could never separate Nietzsche from Christ. All right, and so he had this love-hate relationship with Christ. So this is at the top of the page, sort of the fifth point down there. He had his whole life was marked by a love-hate relationship with Christ. And one of his later books was called The Antichrist. Now, if you take some of the main quotations that people often remember from Christ, you can't but sense something in Nietzsche that he's now using for his philosophy. Christ had said, "Behold, I make all things new." All right? And so this is the heart of the Uberman impulse in Nietzsche, bringing in something truly evolutionarily positive. At one point he says, "When I look around, I see the survival of the unfittest, not the survival of the fittest. The survival of the fittest would be what he puts into his symbol of the Uberman, the Overman, the Superman, however it's translated into that. Behavior makes all. Supposedly Christ was understood to be coming to renew the whole of the Greco tradition of wisdom and the Hebrew tradition of the law and the Sharia, and take both of them and sort of really bring out life from both of them into something brand new. All right, that's certainly how Christians understand Christ. That they may have life and life in abundance, and that's the motto on this. Because the AUB was a Protestant missionary university, and so that thing on there comes from, of course, the Christian scriptures, and that Christ has come to give. He says that they may have life, and life in abundance. And we'll see that the value that he thinks we should be focusing on are not the traditional values of good and evil, right and wrong, error and not error, falsity and truth, and all this. We need to see what gives life and what destroys life. What gives life and what sucks in life into a black hole, and sort of in your society, in your life, all the time. And so, these were headlines, of course, of Christ's, as Christ has been understood in the Christian world. So, the yay-sayers versus the naysayers. And so Christ, this famous quote of his, "I wish you were hot or cold, but because you are lukewarm, you make me sick, I vomit you." And this is the sort of attitude that I see in Nietzsche as he looks at his European Christian society. He's kind of telling them at his time, "I wish you were cold, I wish you were hot. But you're comfortable, lukewarm. You take your Christianity for what you can get out of it, but you don't take any of the challenge in it, any of the true what is love. Love is giving, love is sacrificing, love is challenging. Not love is a warm feeling of you feel nice towards each other, the benignness of being good to mankind and good to each other." So he could never dissociate himself from his early attachment to Christ all through of his work. And we'll see some interesting things, if I get to them now, that he says about all of this himself. So Christ's confrontation with the religious establishment, which was one of the most interesting and most important things when you take the life of Christ, he had to fight the religious establishment all the time. This was the main enemy. Their hypocrisy, their hold on people, and their corruption of what Abrahamic monotheism was supposed to do, just as this was the attack by the prophets on the Hebrews people, that they were supposed to show by the way they lived the divine reality. God is not to be proven by some abstract thing, but by people who are really living out this God. And so the God is there, the divine comes through the human and can be seen. So supposedly the prophets were saying that the people of Israel were actually a wall in front of people understanding who this God really was. And Christ was saying the same thing to them when he comes. He tells them, you have been you neither enter in nor you let anybody else enter into the religious establishment of his day. Okay? And so he was taking all the values from the Hebrew scriptures that were in there and doing a revaluation of them. And that's going to be important to Nietzsche. He's not changing any of the things from the law, but he's telling them, you have not understood it. You've taken all the life out of it, and you've made it something dead and something like in stone, and something you can oppress other people with, and you can look upon yourself as the holy ones and everybody else are the sinners. This was the atmosphere of the Pharisees. So a revaluation of all of those values was actually taking place in the work of Christ. So out of all of this, and this was in his Protestant and biblical atmosphere, part of his psyche, if you like. And so now he brings it out into this philosophy and these philosophical works in the aphorisms. And this background of his life helps you to understand at different levels and different dimensions what he was actually saying in what he was writing. So these are some of his major works. Notice the second one is human, all too human. I think that's how he would like to have seen himself. He doesn't want to be adored. He doesn't want any Nietzscheans just simply repeating what he said. The joyful wisdom, joy. Christ says, I came to give you joy and to give you newness. And you have become, all I see in front of you are a bunch of dead consumerist early capitalists. Thus spake Zarathustra, the will to power, which I started off with this, and that has caused so much misunderstanding of him that's why I put that quotation from him about how he was trying to help us to see, and he wants to help you to see. Don't read my will to power as a will to impose yourself. It's to impose your strength, but your strength for him is not your physical strength. It's your intellectual, spiritual, forward-looking contribution to humanity, rather than the benign do-gooders of the time and the ones who this blind belief in automatic progress and evolution and the survival of the fittest. He was really cracking into all these cliches, and that's what he would want us to learn. Look at the cliches of today and attack them with a Nietzschean attack. Don't just repeat the ones he was doing in his society of the 19th century. The Antichrist, Ecce Homo, is especially an interesting thing, Twilight of the Idols, but Ecce Homo, this is the book, Beyond Good and Evil, Twilight of the Idols, how one philosophizes with a hammer, all right? Sophocles had called himself a polis fly, all right? So great reformers in the history of thought have always had this aspect of them, of shocking, of hammering away at you. Because if they just try to speak to you in simple language, how many people really respond? Okay, as Thucydides taught, the lust for power is so powerful that, reason is nice, but, the lust for power is what's going to really finally decide what's going to happen. And so he was going to philosophize with a tool which would wake us up, shock us, make us, really rethink and revalue the values, not destroy the values, not invent the wheel, but take a look at what these values at their best represented and try to save them from the mediocratizing of them, the leveling of them that was taking place. Ecce Homo, one of his latest books, is taken from the Christian scriptures, where Pilate, in trying to save Jesus from the religious establishment that wanted to execute him, Pilate, when he interviews Jesus, decides this man, he's a decent fellow. Why should he do that? So he tries to save him by, first of all, torturing him, and maybe this will please the masses. But so he brings him up and he says, Ecce Homo, which in the Latin means, behold, this is the human. Man, by the way, with a capital M, is the human. All right? This is the human. Behold, the human. All right? And, of course, they continue to want to crucify him, but the Ecce Homo comes from that position. That's one of the last books he writes, and as he was losing his mind, he started to identify himself more and more directly with Christ, and he was the one who was being tortured. He was the one who was being persecuted in his own society. And so that's one of the last books he writes, Ecce Homo. These are just some of the people here who've been influenced by him, Arthur Schopenhauer and Kierkegaard. These are people that came before Nietzsche, but sort of in the line of what you see in Nietzsche, Karl Marx, Michel Foucault, Jean-Paul Sartre, and many others have been influenced by this man. Ecce homo. In this book, I want to focus a little bit on this to give you an understanding of this gentleman. He has it in 4 sections. First section is why I am so wise, why I am so prudent, why I am writing such excellent books, why I am a fate. Now, you look at them superficially, as most of us would. This guy's paranoid. Haram fi asfuri. There are other places we can send him to, for mental hospital. But if you read it, you see what some of the things he puts in there about it. His war strategy, but let me first of all say, the ecce homo saying, look at me, and what I have been trying to do is reflect to you what is wisdom and prudence and excellence and faith. So just as you would look to Christ as a model for what, the main things you'd like to take from that model, okay? Look to me, look to my life and to what I've been trying to do. Try to see, so I don't find anything of the paranoid madman in it, but I do find the difficult symbolism of trying to tell you what I have been doing. If you really want to understand my philosophy, my writings, don't miss the main points. I've been trying to show you what a human really needs to do to claim wisdom, what a human really needs to do to be claimed that they're prudent, what an excellent book really has to do, and why I am a fate. In other words, you're never going to be able to get rid of me, baby. And certainly after Nietzsche's works in the 20th century, it's very difficult to sort of ignore him and delete him from the history of thought. So anyway, that's so in some of his comments on what he was doing, his war strategy to attack only matters that are victorious, not ones that are already dead for 100 years and then repeat trying to continue to fight them in your world today, where there are other monsters that have come up that are victorious and nobody's even looking at them, but on the contrary, you're thinking they're so wonderful. Only where a human stands alone, without any allies. Never to attack persons, but to use them only as a huge magnifying glass, to make visible some creeping but as yet intangible crisis. I'm a warner, I'm warning you about what's happening in the world. I'm trying to take your attention away from the conventional and whatever is the latest conventional, and to see what's happening, because at every stage in history things become conventional, and that's the PR thing, politically PC, politically correct and all of this, and other things start to come in, and you don't notice them, and in fact you're attracted to them because they have good slogans and they sound like something else. He was trying to see in his own society what was not victorious, attacking the victorious so that the other things could find life and come in and find space. Self-evaluation. He says, I have contradicted as no one has dared contradict. Nevertheless, the opposite of a spirit of negation, the bearer of glad tidings, good news, the gospel, a yea-sayer with whom the hope of the human race has been restored. This is what he saw himself as doing. And then a little bit more, because from the autobiography, which you don't usually get, I'd like to, at least let you know that this is what he has said. A man of spiritual depth needs friends. This is towards the end of his life. Until he still has God as a friend. I have neither God nor friends. He was ready to pay the price of solitude, right, of a sense of sort of a social exile, in order to stick to what he was trying to do, what he was trying to hammer away. For thus it has always been, and thus it will always be, and this is very important, pay attention to this when you start to think about what is critical thinking. One cannot aid a cause more effectively than by persecuting it, by hunting it with all hounds. This I have done. So if you just take the surface of what he has been attacking, and you want to go on attacking it ad infinitum into the 21st century, you don't get the point. He attacks only things that have something in them to save them. All right? He only persecutes the victorious, and the victorious by definition has something there, but it becomes oppressive. So he is attacking Christianity, he's attacking Platonism, he's attacking everything that he attacks, only because he respects them. He thinks there's something there. that if I persecute it, then the best people in those fields will wake up and stop moving along with the compromising spirit and the survival of the unfittest and all of this. A wake-up call to get people to take seriously what he's persecuting, not to demolish it and to, as if you could demolish Christianity, you could demolish Plato, you could demolish all the, the movements of the modern period. You can't demolish them, but you can try to point out that, there's a disease that hits every great philosophy, every great work, every great religion, and that is that it sucks away the seriousness of it, the value really that's in it, by using it for your own self-interest, and then the institutions use it, and leaders use it, and politicians use it, and it becomes watered down and hypocritical and dangerous. And to see him as a human being, he was a very sensitive human being. Certainly not a Nazi-type human being. Two things just from his autobiographical stuff. Two incidents. Once he was in France, at Nice, on Sunday morning, walking with a fellow friend who was, with him on the way he was thinking. And this young girl passes by, a student, university student in this context, and says, "Oh, good morning, Professor Nietzsche. You're going to church, of course, because it's Sunday morning, you see." And so he says, "Yes, yes." So after she leaves, his friend looks at him and says, "Shad hypocrisy, if you tell you're going to church." He answers, he says, "Not every truth is for everyone. Come on, grow up. You don't just want, I am attacking the victorious. I'm attacking the powerful. I'm attacking the ones who are the most popular and write fancy books, and they make movies of them, and they attract you because of their, all this. That's what I'm attacking. I don't want to disturb somebody who isn't into this. They'll find their own way through it, right? So not every truth is for everyone. If I had troubled the heart of this young girl, I should have felt disconsolate. He had a heart, not just a head. In Florence once, with an astronomer, after he'd gone in and had a discussion with the man because he was interested in his works. When he comes out, he says, "I wish this man had not read my books. He's too good. My influence on him would be very disastrous." You see, I'm not after the people who are not hypocritical and who are serious and who are that. I'm after those who are successful and powerful and turning everybody's heads in the wrong direction. Very interesting gentleman, really. And this is just one of the works he wrote about, when he was leaving his belief in God. It's on your notes. I don't have time for it, but let's get to the God is dead mantra. Okay. One of the things he underlines as he reads Pascal's book in 1885. Pascal had said, "Without the Christian faith, you will be to yourself a monster, not to society. You will be to yourself a monster and a chaos." Nietzsche underlined these words, and they are very much applicable to his whole being, his whole spirit, the whole life, right? He was tearing himself away from it, but he realized that in tearing himself away from it, for him, there was no serious option as a human being, and that, as he would say later on, I never want to be ungrateful to what I got from that. So he was, this was a love-hate relationship par excellence. If there were gods, how could I bear it not to be a god? Therefore, there are no gods. And I believe in the ancient Germanic saying, all the gods must die. But then the madman, which influenced Gibran, of course, and Gibran doesn't give sufficient credit to that. He's watered down Nietzsche. So don't think Gibran is a substitute for Nietzsche. Wonderful man, Gibran, but he's survived. He's become famous on the thought of other people more than on anything really original he presents. But he's our own man here, so we don't want to ever say anything. Don't quote me. Okay, but the madman, have you not heard? Deicide, sorry, this is from it used to be called the gay science, but because gay now means something different, it's now called, the translation of the German, the joyful wisdom. All right. So if ever you come across the gay science, it's not what you might think of it in the world today. It's the meaning of it, the joyful wisdom. Wisdom should be joyful. Wisdom shouldn't just be to develop a better computer or to organize society in a more orderly way. It should be giving you joy and life. God is dead. God remains dead. This is the interesting thing. We have killed him. It's not an abstract philosophical conclusion to an argument or to the grand design of Hawking or anything like that. He's now talking humanly speaking, existentially, as a human being who's into all of that kind of thinking. He says, we have killed him. You see, you're taking the whole notion of the whole business of is God existing or not existing out of the realm, as Kant had tried to do it but wasn't successful, out of the realm of abstraction. Kant had tried to put it into the realm of your moral life, your interaction with other human beings, where value comes up, where authenticity comes up, all right? But people want to still think that they can either prove that God exists or that God does not exist simply by argumentation. It's human life that makes the whole question of God serious or either exist or not exist. We have killed him, yet his shadow still looms. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent from the Greek world? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? You see, this is the issue. We don't want something great. We don't want challenge. We don't want excellence. We don't want a Superman. But that's his whole message is that we ourselves must become gods simply to appear. Must we ourselves not become gods, meaning we must become gods simply to appear worthy of it? And that's his whole challenge. Get off your asses and get off your consumer society and get off your mediocrity and do something that would justify that you're taking. If there's no God, well then there's nobody left but you. That's the Prometheus thing. That's the importance of Oedipus, and that's the importance of an Antigone. They're the only ones who do anything for society. Gilgamesh, the only one who does anything for his society. It's the focus on the importance of the human. Well, do what you're supposed to do. Now, this love-hate thing, thus the cycle began. He writes this to Lou Andrea Salome, a very interesting figure in herself, one of the great women of this period. Thus the cycle began, and he goes on, and it goes on. But where will it end? After having run the full course, whither are we to turn? We've gone away from my Protestant faith, and my Christian faith, and I've been going everywhere. Where are we to turn? And notice this shocking statement. Perhaps we will have, but it shouldn't be shocking. You should understand it. Perhaps we will have to make a new start with faith, perhaps a Catholic faith. See, this, to my mind, shows his openness all the way through. He's not a dogmatic preacher of Nietzscheanism and Nietzschean dogma, all right? Everything he's doing is to himself trying to stay open, him struggling through his own personal trajectory, and trying to, this is wisdom, this is being prudent, this is excellence, this is faith in the Ecce Homo work. Christ, you see, there's another common way of people who want to attack Christianity to say Christ was the only Christian. He was presenting a new way of life that was to bring peace and harmony to the human soul so that the pacified soul might then effect the transfiguration of all things, not to pacify them, not to give them a visa to heaven, but to transfigure, make all things new, really renewed, not just the latest fashion. I call Christianity, and on the other hand, he writes things like this, all this in the Antichrist. I call Christianity the one great curse. You see, both. You have to face both possibilities if you're reading Nietzsche, not just one, the one that you like. I call Christianity the one great curse, the one immortal mark of shame of the human race. And then a letter to Peter Gast, another person of the period, I hope I shall never show myself ungrateful to Christianity, for I owe to it the best experiences of my childhood. And then this very important statement. Can anyone imagine anything that equals in miraculously enchanting force the symbol of the Holy Cross? Now think of it as a symbol. Don't think of it as religion now, please. The symbol of the Holy Cross. Nothing equals in impressive strength that paradox of a crucified God, not of a God who's powerful and all the other stuff, but a God who actually sacrifices himself for the human being, a crucified God. So that, as a symbol, you see, of a God for the human being. The great human is the human who's ready to give his life for society. An Oedipus, a Prometheus, an Antigone, a Christ, and anybody else who fits into that figure of a God crucifying himself for the salvation of men. This sign and symbol triumphs eternally over any other ideal. The last days now is he sort of start to lose it, and there are various versions of why he started to lose it. Some say he got syphilis by going to prostitute places. Others, wanting to intellectualize it more, say, well, he had set such a high standard for himself, and trying to live this authentic life. You see, authenticity becomes the great thing in existential thinking. Not true or false, or good or evil, or nice or not nice, or loving or selfish, but rather authentic. Always doing the best you know at whatever moment you have. Always trying to do the best you know, and realizing it's not that easy, it's not difficult. You're going to have to sacrifice for it, and never worshiping yourself. Always self-criticizing, because he was always self-criticizing as well, all through his work. So this incident with an abused horse also shows how his sensitivity was now being transformed into what happened here. There was a horse that was being tortured in the marketplace. So he runs and he hugs him, as a sign of, if a human who does not know how to be kind to an animal doesn't know how to be kind to a human. I mean, I think we're all getting that message in the world today. But some of the great saints in Christianity, Francis and others, they all had this wonderful relationship with nature and with animals and all of this. So this spring of sort of instinctive empathy can extend even to animals, you see. And that's what empathy is. Empathy is not pity. Pity. He was against pity. Pity means, you're looking at somebody, you're looking at him as lower than you. And, habibi. No. It's not pity. It's sort of, people are trying to find better words in English for what was represented through the meaning of compassion and empathy and ruth. This is not pity, because pity has come to have a very negative view, especially since the modern period in Europe, where pity and humility became the signs of weakness, the signs of thinking you're better than somebody else, and words they lose their value, and you have to revalue them. To revalue them, sometimes you have to make sure you don't say pity and fear when you're doing tragedy, but you say empathy, compassion, and terror. Not fear and pity, because the words, you see, and the people who used those English words a long time ago had a different meaning in them than what you and I might hear them today. And this is the revaluation of values that's part of his whole being. He's not denying the values that have been tested by humans all through. He's just saying you are now taking them in such a watered-down way, in such a self-serving way, that they've lost all their life. And so sit down and revalue your values and make sure these values are giving life, they're giving joy, they're not being oppressive, they're giving freedom. So putting him into context, this hammering away, is in this period of the Enlightenment and the Counter-Enlightenment, where a great focus on reason in the Enlightenment, all right? Well, there's a wonderful passage he has there about reason. I didn't put it into your place. It's on the web. If you want to see him sort of hammering away at the supremacy of reason, the great idol of the Enlightenment, read this stuff. He compares us to gnats, what they would think of us. So it's a very interesting thing, but I don't have time to go through it, but it's on the web. It's not on your fly sheets. Do visit the web and read them. But basically, in this context, he's trying to, there's an imbalance of a movement towards, glorifying the computer and I'm using now modern periods and technology and what we can get through astrophysics and what we can get through the genome, what we can get through all of these things. All these are wonderful, but when you start to make them more than what they can possibly give you as a human being, then you're warping them all. And so he was already fighting this kind of use of this dwarfing of what reason and the human mind really could represent So much more than just what it had become in either the empiricist or the rationalist applications of it through the empiricist or through the rationalist or through a Kant. So a scholarship and a science that's devoid of vitality is giving you death as a human being. And so what he was trying to do was to give you the death of this emaciated reason, and that's where his will to power fits in. It's not a will to power as the Nazis wanted to understand it, but it's a will to vitality, it's a will to positivity, it's a will to being ready to suffer, not seeking happiness. Right? So he was ready to suffer because suffering is more important, not to want it, but you get it anyway. But don't avoid it if you want real truth and you really want something vital and you want true evolution. Don't make suffering your main enemy. So everything you do is for that. So the will to power is to impose your recognition, your understanding, your life of what is true power that will improve humanity, is the heart of what he really means in his will to power. And that's why that quotation, which is was on the thing at the beginning, and it's at the end of this PowerPoint, if you want to look it up on the web, to his sister. Religion and whitewashed sepulchres, okay? Christ had called the religious authorities of the day whitewashed coffins, looking nice on the top, but they're full of dead men, all right? So he was now bringing this into his society. The death of God, you have killed any God that was worth thinking of, because the way you're living shows nothing of what God meant for people who were serious about it. So a transvaluation of conventional values. Your teachers have to go into these more. He was attacking conformism when it disguises itself as progress. This is the latest thing. And all it is being in conformity with what the victorious are considering as progress of the day. Right? No critical thinking within it. It's just really following in the latest victorious line of thinking. He challenges every one of us from our own, wherever we are in this kind of situation, as academics and as people who consider ourselves scholars and critical thinkers, to really think a little bit more deeply about what it means to really be critical. Anti-ideology. This is the anti-enlightenment thing from the preface to On Truth and Lies in a Non-Moral Sense. He compares, the knowledge of the Enlightenment as compared to human and is to the reasoning of the Enlightenment, like a gnat would be to the way it would see its own powers. Anti-ideology. Therefore, the main ideologies of the day were Platonism and Christianism. All right, and so he attacks them primarily. All right? I don't think Platonism and Christianism are the reigning ideologies of any university I have ever visited. All right? But he was attacking the ones that were coming up and have become more popular. Kantianism, utilitarianism, socialism, feminism, every ism. Because why? An ism starts off perhaps as being full of life and a value, but then a lot of people hang on to it, and it becomes sort of a nice bus you can jump onto. Somebody else is driving it. Somebody else has put the benzene into it, and it becomes an ism. So isms are important for us to sort of be able to deal with something very important, but an ism can become an idol. And an idol is a false god, a false worship. For Bacon, they are the things that destroy our being able to think seriously. If you're taken 2 or 3, you'd know what I'm talking about. Kantianism, utilitarianism, socialism, feminism, all the burgeoning things. He didn't leave anything out of his attack. So putting him into any one of our current isms would be the worst thing that he would want to do. He would, he's anti-Nietzscheanism. A state-of-the-art challenge to us. Will you be reading Freud's Civilization and its Discontents, and it does a lot for getting us to think about our own selves. But when you compare it with Nietzsche's effect on the 20th century and on people who take him seriously, it's a tame garden variety challenge, Freud's, whereas Nietzsche, if you take him seriously, is like a tsunami if you're ready to take this kind of a challenge. The last thing I would promise would be to improve mankind. I erect no new idols. Let the old idols learn what it means to have legs of clay. To overthrow idols, that rather is my business. Nietzscheanism he would want to do away with. And all the other terms that I would have liked to cover specifically. The teachers have been through this lecture before, and so if it's still on the web from the previous year, that I covered much more the last time I did it. But I'm trying to get you into thinking, looking beyond the box when you deal with our friend, and all the things he speaks about are very worth commenting on. The survival of the unfittest, eternal recurrence, the will to power, evaluation of values, what is authentic humanity, anti-ideology, anti-enlightenment, perspectivism. All these, I've got references for you in the book if you wish to take a look and sort of flesh them out more, but you have to keep the context of the times. Very difficult to do Nietzsche if you don't have a background in the history of philosophy and the times of the day. And he was against democracy because he felt democracy leveled everything down. Our aim will be now the mediocre, the least common denominator, that will get you the most votes when you want to be elected, rather than seeking. So it's not against democracy at its best ideals and its best things. It's the way democracy has always been from the times of Plato and the Thucydides to our own day, where it's one of the best ways we have. But it's full of manholes and traps, and if you're not aware of them, you can sort of get taken away by the slogans and the voting process of democracy. Thank you.